Hello everyone, welcome back to another Arsenal video people, and again it is a little bit of a disappointing situation that we're discussing and dissecting at the moment after Arsenal's latest loss in the FA Cup, 2-0 at home to Liverpool, has meant that we're exiting that competition at the first hurdle, and it does really feel like a bit of a malaise that suddenly struck, and it's our third consecutive loss in a row following two losses in the Premier League, and it just is a little bit surprising how things are seemingly unraveling now, because prior to these three losses we were actually looking fairly strong, fairly consistent, and as if we were playing in a controlled manner and picking up enough points, enough wins to navigate our way through, to put ourselves in a position where in the second half of the season we're actually able to chase the big honours, the FA Cup, Champions League and the Premier League. However, obviously the FA Cup side of things is no more. We're departing that competition, and it does leave us onto this issue that we have in front of goal, because we're not finishing enough of our chances, and it was a theme against West Ham, it happened against Brighton, against Wolves, even in the matches where we did win, there were glaring opportunities where we could have put the games to bed. And if Pascal Gross, for example, had scored that opportunity against Brighton, they would have got an equalising goal. And today against Liverpool we were punished, because that is what will happen when we play against the better teams, because they don't need as many opportunities to score their goals. They have real lethal marksmen in front of goal who are going to convert opportunities, and unfortunately Arsenal don't have that at the moment. It appears the players are just fluffing their lines when they get in front of goal. And I mentioned this word confidence, people, and I do think it is apparent, it is a factor at the moment at Arsenal, and I do have to ask myself why, because I don't necessarily obviously have the answers to it, but I mentioned in my last video that in the previous season, obviously Arsenal got so close to the Premier League title, then fell away towards the end of the season. And I said this season maybe there has been elements of a hangover from that disappointment. And obviously that would be somewhat of a simplistic cause-effect relationship, and it's probably, there are obviously a multitude of factors that go into it, but I do feel as if the group are maybe slightly unsure of themselves, and when things don't go our way this season, when we do miss a chance, you'll see we'll miss a cluster of chances, or as we've seen in the last couple of games, if we do have a disappointing result, maybe we're more vulnerable to another disappointing result. So we're not quite assured or confident in the fact that we'll pull round and correct the deficiencies or the setbacks. And I do sometimes question, and I did question in the last video, that the strain and the responsibility that are placed on the shoulders of Saka and Martinelli, especially to carry the attack. And at their age, it is a big burden, especially when things don't go their way. A club like Arsenal, where the supporters are very notorious for being quite demanding and for being quite unforgiving in certain aspects, I think the Arsenal fan base do sometimes get a little bit on the backs of people, their own players that is, in terms of criticising performances. So I just feel as if the players are maybe feeling the weight of pressure. I think there is a bit of a pressure cooker around Arsenal at the moment. There's a little bit of a tension, a little bit of murmurings in the crowd, in the support base, that I don't think was there last season. I do think people have questioned Arteta and his signings. I think the Kai Havertz signing was one that was questioned for 65 million. And I do have some doubts about Arteta. Obviously, I do back him, and I've been a big supporter of his. But I am starting to lose just a slight bit of faith in him, in the sense that I worry how skilled he is as a manager. Like, I think he's an excellent coach, and I think he has aspects of his leadership that are really inspiring. I think he's quite a strong person. I think he holds a tough exterior to his body language. I think he carries himself with authority. I think he is quite ministerial or impressive in how he holds his demeanour and his body language in press conferences. But I do fear a little bit about his management. So the fact that certain squad players get maybe pushed to the sidelines at certain points, the likes of Smith Rowe, Nelson and Kedia, maybe Ramsdale as well, a lack of changing things up, of altering the personnel, of maybe putting his faith in certain other players. Like Nelson got a start today against Liverpool, and I was really pleased to see it. But I feel that could have been done more. Nelson could be used and utilised more, because I do like Reiss Nelson. And even the midfield people with Rice, is he carrying too much load too early in his Arsenal career? Could El Neni and Jorginho have been used a bit more just to mix things up at certain points? Could Ben White have been used more as the inverted defender, coming more into midfield rather than Kivior, and at times Zinchenko, if Zinchenko is feeling a little bit of pressure? It is tricky. And one aspect to consider is Arsenal's starting point under Arteta. When Arteta first arrived, the squad was obviously not quite fit for purpose. It wasn't as strong and skilled and experienced as the squads of the Man Cities and Liverpool. So he did have to do a big deconstruction work, in the sense of overhauling certain squad members he felt weren't quite what would be required moving forward. And he then integrated in some of his signings, and obviously the 600 million that he spent has to be placed in that context of the starting point being almost square one. So he did have a big reconstruction process to undergo, whereas with Man City and Liverpool over the past 3 years, it's been a case more of topping up on an existing champion squad. So you do have to place the numbers spent in that context. But all the same, people, I do ask myself the question sometimes, why does the squad continually look light on numbers? Has the investment been placed in the right areas? So 100 odd plus million on Havertz and Vieira, for example, it is a lot of money. Could that money have been spent on more, let's say, reliable, trustworthy, tried and tested players, the likes of a James Maddison, an Ivan Toney, players like that, a Dominic Solanke even? Could the money have been placed in those areas? Now, I'm not going to profess to be wise after the event with Solanke, because this season has really thrusted him into that list of top strikers in the Premier League, scoring 11 goals so far, I believe. But maybe the Havertz, maybe the Maddison and the Toney ones, we could see from quite a while back that they could add creativity and goals. But he's opted for a more hybrid type player with Havertz, which I'm still open-minded about the Havertz signing, people. I still think there are skills and positives that he brings to the table. But did we need a more clinical striker, for example? That's the question that you could maybe level at Arteta. But hey, it is disappointing, people. I'm disappointed with how things have gone, certainly in this game against Liverpool, being out of the FA Cup. I'm not going to completely rip up the manual and say we need to sack the manager and things like that. I don't think that's where we need to be. I think get away on this 2-week break, see how it goes, get the group together. And I genuinely feel, people, like this situation requires a little bit more of the TLC, the tender love and care approach, rather than the heavy-handedness. I just feel the guys need to be reminded how good they are and how good they still can be, and how much there is still to play for in the rest of the season in terms of a Premier League title push and hopefully a Champions League run as well. The season's not all doom and gloom, and that does have to be considered, people. I mentioned that the Arsenal squad isn't quite as strong as Liverpool's and Man City's, and I still think that is the case. If you look at Arsenal's bench, it probably isn't as potent or as deep as Man City's and Liverpool's. And maybe we're maybe still not equipped to fight on 3 fronts. Maybe we can only fight on 2 fronts. Like last season, it was pretty much Premier League and the Europa League, and even the Europa League challenge fell away in March, I think, in the last 16. And then here, it's going to be a challenge on 2 fronts. Again, the Premier League and the Champions League. And maybe that is progression if we can steady the ship here in the Premier League and actually push forward in the Champions League, get to the quarters, get to the semis. All of a sudden, we're fighting on 2 fronts. So maybe there's still that side of things, people. Maybe that glass half full perspective does need to be weighed in. Obviously, after a defeat, it's difficult to maybe see that, but let's try and focus on that glass half full approach, people. Still plenty to play for this season. I do feel we need to go out there and sign Ivan Toney. I really do. I think personally, I think he's got incredible attributes as a striker. I think he's one of the best around, to be honest. So I would love to see Toney being brought in. Maybe, I don't know how the funds sit, people, but maybe that might mean we need to sell. We might need to sell Ramsdale. Might need to sell Smith Rowe. Might need to sell someone like Nketiah. I'm not too sure about how Arteta sees Smith Rowe and Nketiah and even Ramsdale. Are they part of his plans moving forward? And if they aren't part of his plans, maybe it would be worth making the call now in Jan, trying to cash in. If it suited all parties, in the sense if the players wanted out, if there was a suitable club, and if that would mean funds were available then to go and sign Toney, maybe that's the way to go. But it does feel like now, maybe funds, if they'd been managed slightly better prior, maybe in the summer, we'd be in a position where we didn't have to sell the likes of Ramsdale and Smith Rowe, because in an ideal world, I wouldn't want Ramsdale to be sold, because he's still a very good number 2, still a good number 1 in some people's eyes, and certainly would be an able deputy if Raya were to get injured. And I wouldn't want to be selling Smith Rowe or Nketiah, to be honest, but due to the situation we find ourselves in, it might need to be done. Anyway, people, that's my verdict at the moment. Be interested to hear your thoughts on it, as we move forward. All right, people, peace, love.